Hey, Jim, I'm so glad to have you back. Man, we had this conversation over the web. I think it was WebEx that we recorded it. And, it was very popular on our last podcast. I just wanted to, now that I'm in Michigan, I'm here with you at the university. I even wore my Michigan, and he just showed support. But I wanted to come down and have a conversation, because the conversation that we had the last time, we talked quite a bit about the sport, various other aspects of the sport. I want to touch on some other things this time around. But before we do that, let's talk about your background, because you at the University of Michigan, we walked in here into the gallery here, and I didn't realize it after I've known you for a little bit now, but I didn't realize your picture's up on the wall there, and then we were looking at the accolades. But tell me a little bit about your career.
Well, my mother's Russian, my father American, born in China, reared in the Philippines. I think that shaped me a lot, being a minority, growing up as a young child, having parents who loved me, had 3 brothers and a sister, so we had a nice family. Came back to the States, lived in North Carolina, ended up going to Wake Forest University, where I swam. I was a highly talent-fixed, underachieving student. I didn't study unless I had to. I didn't have any real purpose. I was just going through the motions, and I was smart enough to get by. I could have done really well if I had applied myself. I didn't. Graduated from college, Wake Forest, really didn't know what I wanted to do, so I decided to coach swimming, because I swam, and teach high school. So I taught high school for 8.5 years in North Carolina, and coached club swimming. And the high schools I taught in were formerly all black schools before integration. So the white students now were bussed in, and the neighborhood, the first school I taught in, the school was sandwiched between the 2 worst housing projects in town. So we had some rough kids who came from really tough backgrounds. And there were some kids who you couldn't save, for whatever reason. And there were some kids who just needed to be loved. They just needed to know somebody cared for them. And the process of seeing all this led me really to have a religious conversion, which in part put me on a path of finding a deep purpose for why I was here and what I might be good at. And swimming and teaching just happened to be the venues that I used to connect with kids and sometimes adults, to help them negotiate things that life's gonna throw at everybody. You're gonna fail. It's going to happen. There are gonna be times when you're gonna be lonely and you don't have answers, and that's where hopefully family comes in and friends come in. So after I finished my master's work at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, I went to the University of Iowa, where I became an assistant swim coach with the women's program, and I worked with Dr. Jim Hay, who was the head of the Department of Biomechanics. Now, my master's work was in exercise physiology, biomechanics. Kinesiology is what we call it today. But Jim Hay was the top sports biomechanist in the world. So he had a very mechanical approach to looking at sport movement, which had a profound effect on me. So after 3 years there, the job opened here at Michigan. They brought me in. I wasn't a Michigan guy. I didn't graduate from Michigan. I was from the South, so maybe I was a minority hire up here. I don't know, for whatever reason. But Don Canham, who was the most powerful athletic director in the country at the time, said, "You've got the job if you want it." So I took it, and we moved to Ann Arbor. We were swimming in a 6-lane, 25-yard pool, and it was small, narrow lanes. But I worked with the men's coach, John Urbanchek, who to this day had a profound effect on my ability to coach and to understand athletes. I don't think there was a better coach in the world, maybe across all sports, but He put 6 people on the U.S. Olympic team in 1996, 6 men.
Amazing.
And he's just a better person than he is a swim coach.
Mm-hmm.
We would get up after the morning workout. We'd work out from 6 to 8. By 8:30, we were out the back door, and we were 11 and a half miles on a run every morning, 6 mornings a week. And we got more done during that hour and a half than we probably did after we came back to the office. So spending those years with John from 1985 to 2008 or 2010 maybe, profound years of learning, and obviously having swimmers here who, Michael Phelps and Eric Vent and Tom Malchow and Mike Barrowman and all these people were world record holders and Olympic gold medalists. But I've always been the kind of person that I care far more about the kind of human being you are. I'm not that impressed with talent unless it's coupled with attributes that allow that person to help make those around them better. And those are the kind of people I gravitate towards. They're the ones I enjoy working with. So, since I retired in 2012, I run my own clinics now on weekends. We just work with kids from 8 to 18, working on efficiency and distance per stroke. And then I direct the summer swim camps here at the University of Michigan.
Yeah. So you've got a storied career as well. You didn't touch on that because you're a humble individual. But, 27 years with the University of Michigan, right? And I think it would, correct me, I think last time I said it was 12 Big Ten championships, but it was more than that, 14.
We had 14. We won 12 in a row, which is still across all women's sports in the Big Ten.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But, there are a lot of factors that go into that. Some years we won when we shouldn't have. Some years we won and it wasn't fun. But the most important thing is the relationships that you develop with them and with the swimmers and what happens in the rest of their life.
Yeah. That you talk about relationships. That's one of the things when I did research your background, one of the things that comes up a lot is that when you were dealing with, what you're memorable for is when the relationships with your athletes and how powerful you have affected your athletes. I coached at the University of York wrestling back in Canada, and I've had some really good relationships with some of my athletes. In fact, to this day I still talk to them, which is great. But when when you started off at high school, right? Coaching there?
Teaching and coaching what was then AAU swimming, which is now USA swimming. So I had kids that I was swimming and coaching and swimming from 8 to 18, in addition to teaching high school every day too. Yeah. And then the relationships that you built there, because they were, you were talking about they're in a low income area, and you had to kind of build them and kind of motivated them, I'm assuming, so that they could, because they probably didn't have too many people in their lives that would believe in them. Yeah. So you as a mentor became a very important person in their life. Yeah. For the boys, I started an after school weightlifting program.
Okay.
Went to the basement of the school and found these old rusty weights and put them together and cleaned them up, and so we had an after school program for kids who weren't playing football or weren't playing basketball or weren't wrestling or weren't running track and field. And we had a lot of kids who just were small and, unsure of themselves, who came, and I got permission to use the school bus to drive those home who needed it after it, and did some things where we took some kids to church on weekends, and just being able to see them find a better way, better way.
Yeah. I've just done some reading on, actually it's a delinquency theory and crime and stuff like that. It's Herschel and I think it's God's son, whatever. Anyways, it talks about how self-control is one of the major factors that actually, if you don't have self-control within your life, and this is for some crimes, not all crimes, but it
Yes.
rings true with a lot of gang members that
Yes.
I've dealt with. If you don't have self-control in your life, what ends up happening is you have a higher propensity to commit violent acts.
Yeah.
And it's when the parental system fails, the school system fails, and then the church maybe is not there as well. So there's nothing ground in their background or in the background to help them. So a mentor like you coming in, I imagine you probably still have a relationship still. I'm assuming with some of the kids from back then.
Yes. A lot of through Facebook, honestly, is a lot of the kids who swam for me, and some who were students back when they were.
Mm-hmm.
The high school ones, and then I had kids who I coached when they were 9, 10, 11, and 12 on up.
Yeah.
So that reminds me of that book I'm sure I've shared with you, How Children Succeed.
Yes, by Paul Tough.
Yes, Grit, Curiosity, and the Hidden Power of Character.
Yes.
And that one of the intervention methods that they use in there that they talk about in order to teach control and engage the prefrontal lobe,
Cortex, yeah.
playing chess,
Mm-hmm.
and games that have repercussions, so that before you quickly do something, stop, think about whether you really want to make that move, and consider if you make that move, this could happen or this could happen. And having these kids play chess or games that a lot of schools have developed where you have to stop and think before you make a move.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps encourage that self-control. It's not easily done, but you're doing everything that you can at those young ages. And for women, because their brains mature a lot earlier than guys. Mm-hmm. So you've got a better chance with them through those teen years. Guys don't. The research says 25. I've met some 50-year-olds that I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes me, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the prefrontal cortex, the rational portion of the brain that doesn't develop as fast as we hope it would in our children.
Yep.
I mean, and that's why mentorship is such a big thing.
Absolutely.
I think. And with the kids that aren't there, that don't have parents or schools to have that in their kind of failed in the system. So they're lucky to have you, and I'm glad that you do have those relationships. Then you moved on to the University of Michigan, man, and then you built some really good, and I'm assuming because of the relationships that you actually built here, is that why you're so successful?
I think that for me, it was so much about trying to build a culture on the team that fit my values. I did not impart my values on them, but I wanted people who would share some of the values that I have about caring for one another and working, having a great work ethic and becoming resilient in the face of failure. All those kinds of things and those attributes. And when you put a group of people together like that, you may not have the fastest team, but boy, they're gonna try to walk on water for each other at the end of the season. And if that's good enough to be third, you walk away going, this was a great experience. This was a wonderful experience. And if it's good enough to be first, fine, but don't let that go to your head. Enjoy it. Celebrate and appreciate the things that really got you there. And what got you there was culture. It was culture. It trumps everything.
Yeah.
It trumps everything.
Are you talking about culture? And I know you said there were some years that when you won the championships, that it wasn't fun. But I want to touch a little bit on toxic culture within team environment, because I know I've had that, with when I was in part of wrestling teams, and sometimes some coaches don't know what to do. What was your thoughts on those situations?
Well, we had this situation one year that happened in this room. It was the season was over, NC2As were over, and they're college students. There's beer everywhere on weekends. A lot of students don't schedule Friday classes so they can start drinking Thursday night. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So when you bring people into that environment, you have to talk to them about responsible behavior for yourself and responsible behavior for your teammates, to care for one another. when some people decide to go off the reservation.
Yeah.
They go out of bounds.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to be there to protect them? So we had developed a purpose statement for the year, and we revisited our guiding principles and guiding values that we were going to hold each other hopefully responsible for, but in some cases, kids who didn't quite get it, they had to be held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard in the spring through some of our moles that we had some people that were out of bounds.
Mm-hmm.
They went over the guardrails,
Mm-hmm.
and it was due to drinking. So I brought them into the room, and I put up their 5 guiding principles on the whiteboard
Mm-hmm.
in black, and then I took a red magic marker and I drew a circle around 3 of them. And I asked them, what are these? And it was quiet. And somebody finally said, those are our values. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm calling the question on these 3
Mm-hmm.
that circles are around.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear there's some behavior that's out of bounds when it comes to these 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to leave you all here, and you all need to decide whether those things matter or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you decide they don't, send your captains to my office right down there and just tell me, get rid of those 3. We're only going to live by 2 of them. I'll do that. They're not my values. They're yours. They're the ones that you said you were going to live by.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll, bring in your team manuals. I'll tear out that page. I'll print up a new page. And you may need to revisit your purpose statement, because that is not really consistent with what I've been hearing either.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you'll just have 2 things you're willing to live by,
Mm-hmm.
and hold each other responsible and accountable for.
Mm-hmm.
And it took them about 50. I walked out and I said, if you want to leave them there, just tell me that, and that you're going to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to my office, and 10, 15 minutes later, the 2 captains walked in, just stuck their head in the door and said, everything's okay, leave it the way it is, we'll handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that to me is building the kind of culture, sense of responsibility to one another for what you have,
Mm-hmm.
and what you're trying to create and how you're trying to create it.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have another incident for the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really a good team. But I had a team one year where the year before they were marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
And then some petty jealousies crept in the next year.
Okay.
Who got elected captain and who didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And some petty things that had happened when some of these swimmers were younger
Mm-hmm.
crept into these relationships, and they broke into silos.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried, boy, we tried.
Mm-hmm.
And we won.
Yeah.
But I couldn't wait for the season to be over.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very unpleasant. We were fast. We were fast and we won.
Yeah.
But it was not fun.
Yeah.
It was not fun. And so the beginning of the next year, I invested a lot of time. I think one of the things that as a leader you can fall into is you think that, okay, we're where we need to be. Everything's going great. And so you kind of relax on teaching and maybe bringing somebody in to send the same message a different way, and
Mm-hmm.
do those kinds of things that keep reinforcing what you're looking for. And I probably got a little slack
Mm-hmm.
on that because I thought we got this.
Yeah.
But they're young people. They're
Mm-hmm.
young people. And so you, as a leader, you have to do that kind of culture building every year, irrespective of how solid you think your team is.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting here, especially. I mean, you're doing a preventative, just as you're doing that, preventing toxic culture.
If they're heading it off at a much lower level
Mm-hmm.
quickly, the behavior doesn't fester and grow and rise to the point where maybe it reaches administration.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's out of my hands. I can't, and it's out of your hands. You can't do anything about it. And it's really your fault because you looked the other way and you tolerated that, and it was in violation of what you knew we stood for, and you let that happen, and look what happened to that person because of it.
Yeah, I kind of equate that to like parenting. If you have a child and it's got poor behavior, if you let that poor behavior continue and continue and continue, well, when that individual grows up to be a teenager, guess what you're getting? You're getting a kid that's going to be very problematic.
Well, you see it a lot in youth sport, is parents who are so married to the performance of their child that they are willing to overlook behavioral issues because they don't want to upset the child because it may affect their performance. I use Tiger Woods as an example of a growth mindset. When it comes to the game of golf, nobody had a stronger growth mindset than Tiger Woods. When it came to personal relationships and his family, not so much. Not so much.
Yeah.
So the person who thinks that the parent who thinks you're going to have a wonderful child as long as I don't step in and have to have conversations about their behavior and try to grow honesty in them and integrity in them and responsibility in them and these kind of character traits, that once they leave their sport, the talent was all in that sport. Now they've got to exist in the real world. Well, nobody cares how fast you can swim. They don't. But they do care about your character attributes. Care about your honesty level, your integrity level, what kind of a work ethic you have, what kind of a team player you are. Are you a giver? Are you a taker? Those are the kind of things that in the real world really, really matter. And parents who ignore those kinds of things, developing those kinds of things, are making a big mistake. They're making a big mistake.
Yeah, I'd have to, well, I agree. You're creating a monster. If you're not challenging that behavior, again, back to the child behavior, you're it's going to keep going. And it will haunt you in later years. And like you said, it'll haunt that person within their business life, after swimming, after athletics. I think it's our job as parents, it's incumbent upon us to actually bring our kids up so that they are presentable in the world. I can tell you, I've had parents that, have been in my program, and I've watched the way that they interact with their children and just what you described, more focused on the athletics, less focused on the behavior. And, those are some of the hardest kids to coach.
Yep, absolutely. And it can go both ways. It can be a kid who just gets beat down by a critical parent, and they become afraid to do anything or say anything and will make a mistake. They're just fearful of what's going to happen if they make the mistake. And then you have the other side of it, which is they become entitled. I can do anything I want to do because I have this talent. I'm better than everybody else. I'm better than everybody else on this team because I'm the best swimmer on the team. And without me, they're not going to be as good. And that sense of entitlement, you get those people outside of their area of talent and try that in the real world, good luck. Good luck. It's parenting is, it's fine if you have a kid who has exceptional talent. But most of us in coaching, I would rather work with a kid who had less talent but had great attributes. And then the ones who have the great talent with the great attributes get out of their way. Just get out of their way. They know how to find lane 4.
Yeah.
And they're coachable, and the discussions you have with them are more along the lines of, well, tell me what you thought about this during the swim, and they'll tell you, and then they'll say, what did you see? And you have these kinds of really more meaningful exchanges about helping them get to where they would like to go. Yeah, so the parents need to parent. They need to provide a safe place for that child to come home every day that's not contingent upon performance. There was research done on the U.S. Olympic team where they asked, one of the questions they asked them was, what do you like to hear from your parents, after a swim meet? And the answer predominantly was, I love to watch you swim.
Yeah.
I love to watch you swim. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted to hear.
I mean, I can't imagine. And my dad was my wrestling coach. He was a 3-time Olympian. I think I told you that before. So I always had that critical kind of, he and to his credit, he played both the father role and the coach role. But at times it was conflicting for me because I always had to live up to his status, and it was tough because I didn't want to fail him, and I think that's part of that mindset that we had. You talked about is if we focus more on I think I would have had a better relationship with my dad had the wrestling been backed off and maybe let another coach kind of come in.
There's an interesting concept about how authoritarian you should be and how authoritative you should be. And they're not the same thing. Authoritativeness is sharing ideas. Okay, authoritarianism is you do what I tell you to do. And they're juxtaposed against maturity. The more immature somebody is, the more authoritarian you have to be with them. You have to put those safety things on drawers. You can't have anything, because they're young, they're going to, be into everything. So you have to put restraints. You have to be far more authoritarian when somebody's immature. The more mature they become, the more freedom you can give them because the more trustworthy they are, and then your discussions become authoritative, not authoritarian. And if parents could understand that as kids transition through, the preschool into elementary years and then into their teenage years, you're trying to give them the opportunity to earn more trust. And as that happens, your discussions become more authoritative. Well, Mom, what do you think about this? This happened to me at school today. What do you think about that? And Mom, well, how did that make you feel? And then you have these kinds of discussions, about, okay, well, what do you think? Let's talk about some ideas. What can we do about this? And those kinds of discussions are substantive and relationship building. And the same thing goes on in coaching. The time we almost walked off the deck at a meet because our distance swimmers kept positive splitting all fall, and we told them if they continued to positive split during the mile, the assistant coach and I were going to go get lunch. And their eyes got about this big. And I mean, it was done in good humor, but they all even split or negative split, and that's what we wanted to see. And so we could joke about it for the rest of the year. But that was a little more authoritarian slant on it because they probably needed that a little bit at that time.
Yeah, but it's good if you're giving feedback to in a positive kind of atmosphere as well. And we talked, I think we went back and forth about the feedback fallacy, and what I found interesting was about the studies that where they talked about how when you're receiving, and parents do this too, right? You talk to your kid and you give them negative feedback, and automatically that portion of the brain that's responsible for fight or flight lights up. It lights up.
Yep.
And when that stops, everything else, or when that starts, everything else shuts down. So I remember having those conversations with my father and him criticizing me, and in my head I'm going, shut the hell up. I don't want to hear this right now. And there was you weren't getting through that layer of... There
was no teaching going on then. No. And thank goodness we've learned so much more about neurology, the neurology of behavior. And out of that comes what's the best way to help someone find their very best performance given the environment and everything that's going on. And as a coach, are you doing something that causes them to withdraw and shut down? I love watching the NCAA basketball tournament because there's ebb and flow during games, and I love watching the coaches and how they're responding. And I watched the Purdue Penn State game. The Purdue coach, they just had a 16-point lead, and it whittled down to 2 at the end of the game with less than 10 seconds. And you didn't see him screaming and yelling, and he was still teaching, telling them, this is what we got to do. And it was a recurring theme for them throughout the tournament. And I watched the Penn State coach, and they were down 16. And he was a former assistant at Purdue under Tyler Painter, I think it was. And just steady, just teaching, just steady, just reminding, and just a steadying influence there. And they came back from 16 down, darn near won the game. And I think if they were 16 down with, less than 10 minutes to go in the game, and if he had been the kind of guy just scream and yell, and you're doing this wrong, and no, he's not teaching. He's not helping them.
Causing panic, too, as well.
Oh, my gosh. And that performing under pressure, the science of doing your best when it matters most, it's the research has already been done on that. That is not the way to get a person to be able to focus and shut out the irrelevant noise, which the yelling can be irrelevant noise. So I think coaches and parents need to understand the physiology. When you do this is what's happening in that brain. And is that going to help you get the outcome that you hope to have? And so a greater level of understanding of how we interact, what our conversations are like, where are they headed, is yelling at somebody going to give you what you're looking for? Well, you'll probably get compliance. You'll get compliance to authority.
Yeah. I think as parents, we want the easy way out. We want to shut down the behavior. We want it to stop, and then we're happy. But I think the investment in the individual, like you said, it goes a hell of a lot farther, because now you can have those conversations with your kid, and you're building the relationship as you're doing that. You did something wrong. Let's talk about it.
What was it? Yeah. What was it? Tell me what was going on there. Tell me what you were thinking. Who else was anybody else involved? I'm not gonna say anything to other parents or whatever, but in the process of all this, do you think you did anything right? Do you think you did anything right, or tell me what you think. Having those kinds of conversations keeps the door of communication open. And that's the most important thing. When kids stop communicating with you and shutting down, you've probably got to have a professional intervention then. You've probably got to see a counselor, a therapist. And Lord knows with the pandemic, those people they are overworked.
Yeah.
They're overworked. It's the number of kids that just survived during the pandemic with Zoom classes and lack of being with their friends, and now becoming married to social media because that was the only means of communicating with their friends and sharing. So parents have a lot of work to do in rebuilding communication.
Yeah, and you hit on a little bit, you talk about the communication and your kids not opening up and professional intervention. There's some things that happen within sports that, we as coaches and we as parents need to pay attention to. The kids aren't talking and they're not giving us information. It can be hidden. One of the things that, is always in your mind when you're coaching is, sometimes you have toxic environments, but then bullying can occur on the team.
Boy. Wow, that's a tough one, and we talk about it in camp here with our summer camps. I always use this line of going, "Who made you king of Canada to the point where you felt like you could tell everybody else what to do?" And I always have a kid go, there is no king of Canada. I said, I know that, but my point here is the arrogance that you have that makes you think you're better than somebody else is disturbing to me. And what is the cause of that? And sometimes it's insecurity. It's things that those kids don't have that the other kids do have, and so they decide, I'm going to go after this person. I think, what I spoke about before is having these team discussions where they talk about their purpose as a team and their values that they decide that they're going to live by. Gives you the opportunity as a coach to hold people accountable, because then you're not holding them accountable for something that you made up. You're holding them accountable for something that they agreed to. They agreed to do this. Okay, you hear the swimmer is bullying somebody or a couple of girls, or after another girl or whatever. Having your assistant coach with you and calling them in, and perhaps even calling the parents ahead of time saying, this is going on. It's going on my watch with the team. So I'm going to have a conversation with them, and the basis of that conversation is what they agreed to do when they came onto this team. That's the basis of it. And I need to know if they're going to change their behavior in order to be in compliance with what the team has decided they're going to be. And if they're not, they need to find another team, because that is out of bounds on this team. It's not a part of who we are. It's not the way we treat one another. As a matter of fact, it's the antithesis of what we need to have to be a great team. And sometimes you have parents who are so in love with their children, their child can do no wrong, they'll take their child and leave. Good. Better to get it done and nip it in the bud than to have that fester there on and on and on. And what it does is it drives away the good kids. Because you talk about all these things as a coach and a leader, and we're not going to tolerate bullying, and then bullying happens. And if you as a coach don't do anything about it, or as a leader you don't do anything about it, they just lost respect for you as a coach and as a leader. Well, he says this, but nah, that's, it's just talk. It's what we call in consulting, it's just words on the wall. We have these words, and we make these beautiful posters, and we put them in the locker room, or we put them in the halls and frame them so everybody walks by and sees them. But when this happens and this happens, nobody does anything about it. Nobody does anything about it. So it's just words on the wall. Doesn't matter. Doesn't count. So again, it's about having those guiding values, those principles that they as a team agree to hold themselves accountable. And then your seniors aren't really, they're not holding themselves accountable. They're responsible. By then, they're responsible, and they live it. They live it. This former assistant coach of mine, who's National High School Coach of the Year here locally. And,
awesome.
And after her state meet this weekend, she got texts from kids from other teams wanting to know how they could transfer and be on their team.
That's awesome.
And it's not just because they won. It's how those boys treat one another and how they treat their competitors. They swim with other teams, not against them. And that's that whole principle of, you need that great competition to help you rise to that level. You need them. Embrace that. Be thankful that you have that. It's not us against them. It's us finding out, what we're made out of when we've got to really put it on the line. And we need them to help us figure we got to put this on the line. So,
iron sharpens iron.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, in wrestling, we need the wrestler with us. We need those tough wrestlers to make us better.
Every day in practice. The kid who's not going to wrestle in the conference meet, but is going to push you, in your weight class to be better and better and better. And then that kid who wrestles for Iowa State, Iowa, Oklahoma State, whomever, Michigan, I'm going to meet them, mid-year at this meet, and then we'll be at Big Tens, and then maybe NC2As. I can't really be a slacker on this. It's going to be me and that person on the mat.
Yeah.
Can't hide.
I'm going to shift gears. One thing I want to talk about too is so some kids, like you're talking about kids like looking for, they're transferring through another team. So what about kids that are stuck within the training environment that is not really helping them out? I mean, they've reached the potential, but the coaching system there is not pushing them any further. How can they develop some habits in their practice to kind of help them out?
Well, I think everybody should have a sense of what we call the controllables. What can I control? What do I have control over? Well, you have control over all the aspects of your technique. So you can constantly be thinking about improving your technical skill. You have control over how hard you're going to work. What's my attitude towards this set? And shut out, how you feel about how you're being trained, or whether you're getting along with the coach or not, or who's in your lane and who's not. But nobody's going to stop me from pushing off the wall and going down the pool and turning, coming back X number of times. Nobody's going to stop me from doing that. So am I maximizing the opportunity that I have every workout, every set, every repetition? And that's hard when you're in an environment where things are stagnant. And I've seen a lot of those environments, and sometimes those programs are built for the elite swimmer. And if you're not elite, there's not much attention being paid. Sometimes it's pervasive across the board. Everybody's stagnant. And if you've got a great coach, a good coach who's vulnerable enough to say, this was not a good year. This was not a good year. I've got to make some changes as a coach. We're not doing what we should be doing. I need some help. I need to talk to some people who have been through this and have come out on the other side. I need to find out what they did, and then reaching out. Having mentors is really, really important. When you look at business research, the virtuoso CEOs who Dr. Fred Keel in his book Return on Character, all of the virtuoso CEOs in his study had mentors. They all had peers or mentors who, when things were not right, they could call and bounce ideas off of. And have you seen this? And so, a lot of it hinges, a lot of a team's culture and their performance hinges on the vulnerability of that coach, which you can see more readily when you don't swim well and kids are not really advancing and moving forward. So nobody has all the answers all the time. I remember, this is a quick story, Eddie Reese, who's arguably the most successful men's NC2A swimming coach in history. And Eddie brought his team to Minneapolis, and I was on the NC2A committee, so I was there helping to run the meet. And I've known Ed a long time. And after the first 2 days, they did not swim well, which is so unusual for Texas. I mean, they just really did not perform well. And so after the morning session on Saturday, which was the last morning session, the place had pretty much cleared out, and Eddie was just sitting on the bench next to the pool by himself and just kind of contemplating. So I went over and sat down next to him, and I said, Ed, if you don't mind me asking, could you tell me what you think you've learned this year? And he looked at me, he said, Jim, I've learned that we're a village of fools and you're looking at the mayor. And he took total responsibility for
extreme
where
ownership.
they were. and how they performed. And yeah, I love him. He's taught me a lot, whether he knows it or not. And having a coach that's vulnerable and transparent, so they know when they're honest about why things are, probably gone south, and as opposed to the coach who always blames the swimmers. When we don't swim well, it's always the swimmer's fault. Yeah. It's never my fault. Couldn't be my fault. So yeah.
While you were talking there, I started thinking about Angela Duckworth's book on grit, and when she talked about, she's doing this running, and she talked to the world class expert on grit, and he says, why am I not a world champion? I run every day, I do this, I do that. I'm not going anywhere with that. And you're talking about, as an individual going into practice and working on the controllables, right? The things that she talked about to me, or that he talked about in when she was interviewing this fellow. I forget his name. I'm not sure if you remember him. But going in and basically being an author of your own destiny at times, because if the coaching staff is failing you, then you kind of have to.
And sometimes you don't have the ability to leave and go somewhere else. You have to stay there. Sometimes if you have the ability to leave and go somewhere else, after exhausting every option that you have within that environment, you need to go. You need to go. And you need to associate yourself with an environment that's going to be help you grow, and be surrounded by people who are encouraging, teammates and coaches alike, who are dirt honest.
Yep.
That call them like you see them, but do it with love. And so there are times when you do have to go. I've had a couple of swimmers leave my program through the years. Two of them I didn't want to see them go. One of them had to leave for financial reasons. The other one, she thought she had a good reason. She went somewhere else and thought that was the answer. She swam 1 year and then she was done. And she was good. And she was really good. And I liked her a lot, but there are always usually some issues, and I think sometimes it's culture, is that they come in like on a recruiting trip and you explain what your culture is, and the women on the team tell them what the culture is, and they go other places and they think, oh well, I'll still be able to do what I want to do, and then they come and they go, they do what they say they were going to do. And that's not what I'm used to in my program. So that's going to happen in any organizations, that sometimes people, and I made one mistake in recruiting. That it was measured, and I thought once they got here that our culture would be so strong that she would see it and she would make the adjustment. No.
Too ingrained in her.
She pulled another swimmer with her. She took another swimmer with her and ruined her performance in her career. So so it's people. Not everybody gets it. Not everybody figures it out while they're here. Sometimes they figure it out after they leave here, and then you get a nice email or a letter. I'm sorry. I had to do that for my college coach. Oh boy, I don't think I've ever told this story before, but I was in a fraternity, and we had to turn in our equipment at the end of the year. And I'd had a couple of beers that afternoon. I was of age. But I thought I could take my equipment over and turn it in and just be And of course, he could smell the beer on me when I came into the office.
Oh no!
And so I turned in the equipment. He said, "Come here." And he was a weightlifting coach.
Yep.
I was a strapping 155 pounds. He took me in the hall, and he took my shirt in two hands and lifted me off the ground, and my feet are dangling. And he said, to so many words, "If you ever come back in here again,
Yep.
in this state, I will throw you off the team."
Mm-hmm.
It scared I needed that though, because I was talent fixed and underachieving and not taking things with the kind of seriousness and responsibility that you should. That's the kind of kid I was.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a bad kid, but
Yeah.
you go along with the guys, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was never on a team where there was that kind of culture where accountability and that matures you. And I was really immature. So that was a pretty good authoritarian move that needed to happen at that time.
Certainly was. Very effective.
Very, very.
Yeah, especially for the male ego.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things you hit on was talent fix, and I know we've hit on it a couple times already, but for people that are watching us or listening to this, talent fix, just explain, I know what it is from all your homework that you've given me, but maybe for them, what you mean by talent fixed.
Talent fixed people are people who think that they are good because of what they have to work. They don't think they have to work very hard at anything. And probably the only things that they would spend any time working hard at are the things that they like doing or that they're pretty good at doing already. So they rely on their talent to get through. And that's fine until you run into a wall where your talent can't get the job done. And if you have, the research is pretty clear on this, if you have a talent fixed person and they run into an obstacle that their talent is not great enough to solve, and a lot of times that's academically. Well, I don't need to do my homework, I'm smart. I already know how to do that. I just pay attention in class. I don't do my homework that much. I can make a B or a C and I get by, I'm okay. And then eventually you run into something where you haven't paid the price in terms of working hard. So if you take a type A person who's competitive, and a lot of talent fixed people are competitive, they want to win, and their self-image is really, really important. When they run into an obstacle, they'll do one of two things. They'll either quit or they'll cheat. One or the other. They'll cheat or they'll quit. Both ways give them an out. I just quit. It's not important to me. I don't care. Or if they can't, then they'll try to figure out a way to cheat because they have to protect their self-image. Because their self-image for talent fixed people is really, really important to them. And it's more important than paying the price and doing the hard work and seeking help and admitting that you don't know, that you don't know everything about everything. The growth learning people and failure and failure to them is a mark. It's a mark on them. And they don't handle that well at all. They don't handle it well. Growth learning people, failure is an opportunity to learn. It's information. What did I do wrong? What would help me not make that mathematical mistake again? What did I not understand there? What do I need to do to avoid this happening again? And that's the component of resiliency in the face of failure. It's a learning experience. But for a talent fixed person, it's an ego crushing experience. And so the response is obvious: cheat or quit. So trying to develop young kids who have a growth learning mindset coupled with character, which is Angela Duckworth's Character Lab and the like. So she's a proponent of growth mindset coupled with the character development. And I understand talent fixed because I was talent fixed. I had calculus my junior year in high school, and I didn't do homework worth a ding dong. And I was so immature but I was just basically good at math and could sit in class. But I made C's in AP calculus. And so I had APB my junior year, which was the highest math you could take. And then my senior year, you had to sign up for APA. And you had to go to the math teacher, same math teacher, Charlie Bumgardner. I still remember him today. This was 1966, 1967. And I walked in with the sheet and handed it to him. Mr. Bumgardner, I'd like to take APA. He looked at me, he said, Jim, I'm not going to let you do it. And I was, in my mind, I was going, but I'm smart. I'm smart. Why won't you let me take this class? And he looked at me and he said, and he told the truth. You don't work hard enough. You don't do your homework frequently. You don't work hard enough. And I was like, So, he just doesn't appreciate how smart I am and what a good person I am and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And what got me out of that was meeting my wife to be. Because she studied. And so when we started dating, I would go to see her and we'd go to the library across the street from her dorm and we would study. And guess what happened to my GPA? It went up. So that was the beginning of my transition from being this kind of egocentric, talent-fixed person to becoming more growth-oriented and understanding that, son, everything in life is not going to come easy to you. And at some point, you're going to need to work hard at becoming successful. And all the better if you can find something for which you have a passion, which I did for teaching. And I certainly do for coaching. They're both the same to me.
Yeah. You're, talent fix, that whole lesson that you're talking about where you learned it yourself. You passed it on to the kids that you were here with, right? Obviously that was a big lesson, I believe, why you're so successful with your team. Giving them the same tools that made you successful.
Yeah, we had them read the book, Mindset. By Carol Dweck.
Yeah, and you recommend those books to the camps that you do?
Oh, camps, clinics. And I have parents, send me emails saying, my child is reading Mindset right now. Thanks so much for recommending this book. It's made a real difference in our communication and just being able to be more transparent with one another and talk about things that really matter. And I'm just trying to pass on things that have worked, that they're not theory. I think Carol Dweck had this idea about growth and fixed, but she did the research that bore out the fact that these exist, and then the people who have in the book recommendations on how to transition somebody from a talent fix to a growth learning mindset, and that's based on conversations, having these really, it comes back to conversation and relationship, having these meaningful conversations that let you understand where somebody is. So a lot of that is ask more, tell less. Because when you ask, you get an idea of where they are. Don't assume where they are. But if you're always telling, your assumption is, okay, they're getting this. They're where I think they should be. No. You ask to find out where they are and what they understand.
Yeah, I know, in policing, people think that cops are always saying tell. But one of the things that I always want to hear people's stories. I always want to know what's going through their mind. And I use an acronym, actually. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's TED. It's tell, explain, and describe. And what it does is it helps elicit more information from an individual. Because if you ask one, closed questions, yes or no, we're not going to get anywhere. It's going to be yes, no, and then you're not getting the information you get. But the minute you say, hey, well, tell me about your day, well, then they have to elaborate on that. And then if you don't get the information that you want from there, you can explain explain to me how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if you dive into it further, will describe that process to me.
Yeah.
So you have those 3 words that are so powerful. And if you remember the name, the acronym TED, man, it's done me a lot of service in regards to the neighborhoods that I work in, because it shows that I'm not that individual that just wants yes or no answers and then makes a decision. Because those are, I think, as a parent, as a people dealing with, or a teacher or a coach, you're not investing in the individual when you do that. And this goes a long way when you're investing. Proof is in the pudding. Look what you've done with the University of Michigan and other places as well.
I took a course in conversational IQ taught by Judith Glasser. And she has what she calls a conversational dashboard. It's like the old
you said that
speedometer. Yeah. And so on this end, you have a resistor. They're resisting everything. Okay. And on this end, you have co-creation. Together, I buy in, we're going to co-create. And then you have gradients. And what you want to be able to do through conversation is to be able to move somebody from being a resistor to maybe a wait and see to, I think I may, to full buy-in. And what the nature of that conversation is going to determine how that needle moves. And if that conversation is authoritarian, top down, and you've got somebody who's already in a bad state, man, they're diving deeper into resist. And you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anywhere.
That's awesome.
Highly authoritarian then.
Well, you know what? I want to thank you first and foremost. My coaching philosophy has absolutely changed since I've met you. Just from the readings that you've done and the conversations that we had. And I have seen my athletes become better people as a result of that, I'm sure. And you should take some pride in that yourself, because you've passed that on to me. I've been able to actually, yeah. I mean, I now have better relationships with my wrestlers as a result of that. So I want to thank you for that, but also want to thank you for doing this podcast again. I know this is taking time out of your life to do this sort of thing, but I think you got some great messages. I think some parents, some coaches will, if they listen to this, they're going to go, hey, I might change my philosophy as well. So I want to thank you for helping us out and coming down and letting us come down and sit at your home with the University of Michigan and talk.
My joy, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Shawn.
That was awesome.